Profitable practices. Farm solutions for people, profit, and the planet on Real Agriculture is brought to you by Farm Credit Canada and RBC Royal Bank.
Hi, I'm Amber Bell, and this is Real Agriculture. I'm here today with Byron Long of Long Family Farm. He has been playing around with wider corn row spacing, and we're going to be talking today about what he's done, why he's done it, and the results that he's gotten for this Profitable Practices episode. So welcome, Byron. It's great to have you.
Thanks.
Okay, so we are here at Long Family Farm, and as you can see, there's a lot of corn behind us.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about your farm background, what you guys do here. What does your operation look like?
So we're a mixed farm, cow-calf and grains, and basically for the cow side, the least amount of work possible, and obviously the least amount of money in is the most amount of money back out. So that's kind of our goal, is least amount of work, more profitable.
Right, and what's the size of your farm?
We're about 1,500 acres, and we're pushing 100 cows right now. So these are actually pairs that are in here. These are calf on side. So that's the other exciting thing about this, is we're grazing them, everybody together. Heifer, calf on side, and the cows that are pregnant as well. So
very cool. And so with the wider corn row spacing, for one, can you tell us a little bit about the mix that you did? What kind of got you into this? Why?
So I'll give a shout out to a guy by Westlock, Colby Hansen. I saw him doing it a couple of years ago, and it really made a whole lot of sense, especially because he had the cows and calves. And yeah, wider rows, so you got a crazy mix of all kinds of warm season, cool season grasses and legumes and stuff between the rows, and basically like zero supplementation. I was a little bit scared last year. The cows went off mineral, and so this year doing a little more feed testing, we're actually showing elevated amounts of micronutrients, and so that's why they're going off mineral when they come into this mix. They basically get a balanced ration, and other than giving them free choice pea straw and some 2-year-old oat straw, yeah, it's pretty much just let them in, limit them to a couple days at a time. And
right, and for the actual practice of seeding this, you were telling me before there was a lot less nitrogen used than what you would normally use in corn, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. This actually only has 35.5 pounds of actual N with it. I mean, it's pretty much, you limit it as little as possible, well, safely anyways, but because of the legumes, they do share nutrients, and yeah, it definitely bumps the profitability big time.
And the way that you like we were talking earlier about the weather, what it's been this year, and it's been a pretty rough year for grain crops.
Yeah, it's so, yeah. So initially, a corn planter comes in, plants it, and we had 3 weeks of cool weather, so corn just kind of sat there dormant. It was barely poking out of the ground. Then finally we got some heat, it took off. Then to seed the mix between the rows, we had a little too hot of weather, and so it was 3-4 inches of just powder dry, and that was seeded on July 7th. So I mean, it was less than ideal. We had too cold and too hot, but all in all, I mean, it's still looking very good.
Yeah, definitely. And what were the practices on this land prior to planting the corn and the cover crops mix?
So this year I went full tillage. From last year I did 0 till on my corn on the same mix. This year we did a disc pass and then a heavy harrow, and then the corn planter went through, then a couple herbicide passes, and then came back in with the drill with openers flipped up to avoid the corn rows to seed the mix in between the rows. So it's a little more work up front, but this time of year it's pretty nice to not have to be doing much when it's cold out. Just roll out a poly wire and let the cows do their thing.
That's for sure, and I think the poly wire makes a big difference. So how many times are you going to be moving them across this field, and how big is this field?
So this is 65 acres. There's 14 acres we've already used up. And basically, I don't know, I'm probably a couple acres that, trying to go for 3-day moves. Day 3, I'll give them a bale of alfalfa just to bump the energy, do a little more cleanup. And we're not doing a complete cleanup. Like, this is in the spring, I'll be turning the pears back in here just to clean it up again. So all in all, when you figure out animal units per acre, it should be right around that 240 animal units per acre.
Okay, and then so the feed value, because I mean we know that corn is pretty high value feed for cattle. throughout the year, a lot of people are going to corn. What is the extra value that's being added by adding the cover crop mix?
So by adding the plants in between the rows, that's where we get, I guess, a lot. It's not so hot and cold. Because when they consume the cob, it's very high energy. Then the leaf matters obviously a lot less. Whereas this stuff between the rows, it's kind of interesting to watch the cows graze it. They'll go for the cobs first, then they'll go for a lot of the straw. They'll come back in, they'll start consuming the leaves, and then they'll really go after the mix between the rows. The calves actually pretty much just concentrate on the stuff in between the rows. So it's kind of neat how they kind of self-regulate.
Do you think that it helps with the even plane of nutrition when it comes to it?
I would say so for sure, yes.
Right, because if you're just turning them into corn, they're getting all the cobs right off the bat.
Yeah.
And then...
Yeah, and you have to do a lot more supplementation there, where this, I mean, we're not really supplementing other than a little bit of straw. And then on the last day, I'll give them one bale just of hay.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So Gateway Research Organization did some feed value testing,
yes,
from my understanding.
Yep.
And what were the results of that?
So pretty exciting. So I did a couple different tests here. We did 90-inch row, 60-inch row, and 45-inch rows between the corn. And on the wider rows, our corn tonnage came down about half a ton every time you went a little bit wider. But our mix between the rows more than made up for that. So on the wider row, we had 3.5 ton in between rows. And then as low as 1 ton on the 45-inch rows. So it really stepped up, and that's when the feed test really showed, I mean, a big bump or big positive on the wider row. It just gave that much more mix between the rows, and that really brought up the energy. So.
And you were saying like there's the micronutrients in this is incredible too.
Yeah, that's the other cool thing is, so looking at the feed tests, yeah, the copper, manganese, iron, everything's up. On the wider the rows went, the more the micros came up. So it's next year, I kind of surmised that, the 90-inch rows were looking the best throughout the growing season. And after looking at the feed tests, I'm definitely going to be pushing 90-inch rows next year. Yep.
That's amazing. And before you did corn, what were your feeding practices?
So we've been trying to be as low input as possible. We were doing swath grazing, and we've only been stung once on that with bad weather. But so that's the nice thing about this. You can get a big snow load and it still stands.
Right.
And so it's a lot safer that way. But yeah, swath grazing, bale grazing, and we still do some bale grazing. As soon as we go into our bale grazing, I mean, your cost of feeding goes up exponentially 4 or 5 times versus this. So.
Wow. And okay, so let's talk a little bit about the economics of this, because I mean, it does cost a bit to have the equipment and to be seeding and spraying and tilling and, anything else that needs to be done. So what have you found, like what are the actual numbers on this practice? Yeah,
so when I figure everything out, I figure it out at a custom rate. Like I owned nothing for equipment. If I had to pay a custom planter, a custom drill come in, custom sprayer, herbicide at on label rate and everything, it comes out to about $410 per acre. So it's an investment up front, but when you look at the grazing days or the animal units per acre, it worked out to 160 animal units so far per acre, and that's a 1,000-pound animal. So you're comparing apples to apples, and the numbers. I projected to be about $1.60, and I'm more like $1.99 right now, just because our tonnage isn't as high as I was kind of hoping, but. It's still looking incredibly profitable.
How does that compare to when you've done swath grazing or bale grazing?
Probably, so last year, like I said, my cost almost doubled when I went into the bale grazing. And I mean, So when I was looking at the cost of hay, I said $187 per ton. It's about $120 a bale. This is like a fifth the cost.
Right.
So it's very attractive, yes.
Right. So, and then if we're talking about like, how do you determine whether a practice is successful when you're trying something new?
This is the second year doing it. The least amount of work for me possible. I mean, these cows have all the time in the world, and they got 4-wheel drive, right? So it's, I like to let them work for me. As much as I like them, if I'm not making money at it, I won't be doing it. So the money side is
a big part of it.
Yeah,
right.
The calculator makes all the decisions at the end of the day, not my heart. So
That's great.
It's looking really good. Yeah, definitely going to go ahead with a lot more of this.
And what would you say to any farmers out there that are considering trying some wider row spacing, a cover crop mix? Because you had what was your seed mix in this?
Oh boy, it had
like 16 or something?
Yeah, it had quite a few plants. Had all kinds of different brassicas, a bunch of different legumes, some sorghum, some millet, sunflowers, forage peas, a bunch of different cereals, I think. Yeah, whole mix of stuff. And so, I mean, you get all kinds of different rooting depths. and different nutrients because of those plants. And
So what would you say to a farmer that's wanting to try that?
oh, yeah, get out there and ask a few people, but don't be afraid to try it. I mean, it's, I wanted to prove to myself, you know, the difference in rows, what could be, you know, the difference there. And definitely the wider looks a lot more attractive. The feed test shows the same, so don't be afraid to go wider. It's I know like a lot of the guys in the States are doing 60-inch corn for grain, and then they're doing, you know, grazing after the fact. And on strictly feed, I think the wider shows a lot more potential yet. So
Was it a lot of extra work throwing the cover crop mix in?
it's another drill pass, so yeah, it is a little bit of labor, but I'd much rather be doing that in the springtime and relaxing this time of year when it's cold.
That's very true. Well, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. And that was Byron Long of Long Family Farm on Real Agriculture.